Hello, dear hearts. Thank you so much for connecting, especially now regarding this solar eclipse in Aries taking place on the 29th of March 2025, which completes the in-between eclipses period that started with the lunar eclipse in Virgo and took us up until right now as this solar eclipse in Aries peaks, which teaches us of the final message in directional Aries in terms of the directional nodes, the lunar nodes, the north node versus the south node where we're coming from, and all the lessons of the past becoming a more directional theme for the collective, which is directional Aries. It has been a long 18-month period, very long, in terms of the teachings of directional Aries, which have not been shy. We all know that Aries is all about war, combat, the essence of man, being human in the form of warriorship on an exalted positive level, but in a degenerate way, once again, it's about combat, war, aggressiveness, and really trying to exert the masculine in terms of dominating leadership through force and through conquering. So working with this energy in a positive way, it's been about empowering the identity of the I in healthy ways that better serve the whole. And the last 18 months would have had a lot of teachings linked to how we exert and direct ourselves in our personal lives and how we actually lead our lives and work with the physical form, our bodies, our character, how we relate to our character, how we develop our personality, our traits, our characteristics to, again, better serve the whole and take more leadership-oriented stances in everything we're doing. So new beginnings on an entire level when we look at the last 18 months. However, departing from the teachings of Libra would imply coming away from what takes place in union and directing energies more towards what we can do as an individual, as a unique contribution to the whole. Now, in saying this, there are many messages that have been coming through, and I have shared in the previous 1.0 video talk on the lunar eclipse in Virgo. I've shared very much about just the general theme of the astrology of March 2025. But as we look at the astrology of April 2025 as well, post-eclipse, there's a lot to say because, like I said, the end of the directional Aries energetically, where we're all steering towards as a collective, is really going to stabilize in directional Pisces, which is a totally different theme for the next 18 months to what Aries is. And it's always quite interesting to note how big shifts are happening in our skies with Neptune departing from his home base in Pisces going into Aries. In the next 1.5 year period, Neptune will stabilize in Aries. We're getting glimpses of that this year, but in 2026 there will be a very firm positioning in Aries. So, even though we're leaving directional Aries in terms of the nodes, we are definitely getting ready for a huge collective long transit of Neptune in Aries, which will continue that theme in a way that works with the reality that we are exposed to. And, this illusory understanding of Neptune in Pisces, which is so much about the dream, about everything that comes from the creative mind that is capable of fabricating, of projecting, of all sorts of wondrous, bedazzlements that can happen through creativity that can take place on the outer level. Neptune in Aries does sabotage that and offers massive reality checks where things become quite clear-cut, but also quite aggressive and quite confrontational, because Aries energy isn't anything short of that. However, we will have opportunities to focus on what matters and also see how we can be a better contribution to the whole through our collective part. But there are extensive teachings around Neptune in Aries, and I will release that segment like I am releasing Pluto in Aquarius, so you can get a feeling of where things are going. Both Pluto in Aquarius, long transit, and Neptune in Aries, another long transit, and then not to mention Uranus also taking place in firm effect in Gemini after 7 point so years in Taurus. We are definitely going to see a very different flavor to the collective teaching. And this is all happening in these couple of years ahead of us, 2025, 2026, these big changes. And we're at the 0 degree, 1 degree point of Pluto in Aquarius, and that also will have its dance and how we, get into the flow of that vibration. But you can see major outer planets doing their huge shifts, and it always comes with a before and after taste, because we're leaving the final degree, going into the 0 point, entering the first, second degree. So, that final degree has so much there, and that's why keeping an eye on Uranus and Taurus and how that impacts us personally at its last degrees in the sign, or I guess you could say final moments in the sign, because it depends on how the planet moves. Uranus has another way of moving through our universe, and so does Venus in if you compare it to the rest of the planets. But still, in saying this, it's good to see how this works us personally, okay? Because the same thing goes for Neptune Pisces going into Aries, as well as what Pluto's been doing in Capricorn and Aquarius. It's important to see the personal message as we work with all of this. So with the eclipses, eclipses are uprooting so much, creating, brand new soil to plant, but creating a lot of change. There's a portal of endings and beginnings with all eclipses. And wherever there are many eclipses taking place in one calendar year, it's inevitable how much change can take place. So, this year we do have a couple now that we've just started the year with, 2025. And then at the end of the year, we'll have a couple more. But it's important to understand how many eclipses will be taking place. Do you understand? In the year of 2025. Because if we look at 2020, there was 6 eclipses, right? And if we look at the maximum eclipses that can take place in one calendar year, it's generally 7, and that is very rare. So, we have the next series of eclipses taking place in September as well. Energetically, lunar and solar working with more total lunar ecliptic energies this year for 2025, which does work on the subtle body and the subtle teachings and the more inner dimensions and the energy of night and the cycles and phases that change in a more swift way, because the moon is shifting in terms of its visibility in a very swift way every calendar year and every calendar month, as opposed to how the sun is appearing, which does go through its shifts on a monthly basis when it works through a certain star sign. So you can understand the swiftness of the lunar energy, because it's very interactive and it's going through its phases, and it has such a strong hold on the subtle dimensions and planes of our existence and reality, as it governs the tides, as it governs, the water element, and how it does so much also for the concept of agriculture, wherein we don't really understand its value. We think that the sun is doing the major part of the work, which it most certainly is, but lunar energy is just as vital because it is working on another level. So they go together to create what is living on this earth. They go together to create what is being able to function in this reality. They are really key forces of influences, hence why eclipses are so important, because that energy, lunar and solar and the earth, unite, whether they do it in a complete opposite way or unified way, depends on whether it's a lunar eclipse or a solar eclipse. And right now we're working with the solar energy, so the solar eclipse is taking place, which is an obvious statement in Aries, which is the first star sign of the 12 zodiac star signs. And what this means is it is eclipsing so much of what is, identified with on this earth and in us. And because it's in an obvious outer stance of a star sign constellation, it's not in a hidden place. Like, for example, if there's an eclipse in Scorpio, there's a lot of what hides getting visible. But because Aries energy is very visible already, and it's linked with the first placement of the run around the sun in our galaxy, it is a visible, clear-cut message that gets further amplified. And there is actually a lot of beneficial energy coming from this eclipse, this solar eclipse in Aries. As hard as it is to, value post-eclipse, post-solar eclipse in Aries, you will understand more and more of the value of this eclipse because of its, accessibility to being a solar mover and shaker of energies. And you'll see the contrast when you have time to reflect of how the lunar eclipse in Virgo worked versus this solar eclipse. Very different energies, very different direction, very different change markers and points of reference, okay? So there are 4 key eclipses in this year, okay? And I think it's important to understand that anyone who is a Libra or an Aries or has a lot of Libra or Aries placements in their star map, they will, of course, be affected far more than anyone else in terms of what's happening personally with these astrological events. And because the teachings of the eclipses happen well and truly before they take place, the portal opens up, and definitely after they take place, you must also consider anyone who has a lot of Pisces, Virgo, Pisces in their star map. Okay, so just so you can get an idea, because we wanted to talk about how many eclipses are happening, and we have looked at the, potential of concentrated energy working with eclipses. And this is definitely the case because, we've had so much happen in 2020, which tells us very clearly, that there's obviously a reference there for us to look at in terms of surrendering as a collective when there's 6 eclipses in one calendar year. But you need to know this. In 2027, we're going to have 5 eclipses, my friends. So that's close enough to 6. It's not 6, but it's close enough to 6. So it does, amplify everything a bit. So if you want to say there might be a similarity to 2020 and 2027, we could say that it might end up feeling quite similar in terms of what could take place. Okay. However, what's very interesting is in 2028, right after that, there's 5 eclipses in 2028. Okay? So that's 2 years in a row with 5 eclipses. All right? So I'm just trying to prepare you for the big message, because then in 2029 there's 6 eclipses. So that's exactly 9 years after 2020. Okay. And there will be a build-up. There will be a massive build-up. As we mentioned, 2027, 2028, 5 eclipses, 2029, 6 eclipses. So the real similarity to 2020 will somehow come forth between 2027 and 2035. So definitely note that down so you're aware of this. And what took place in 2020, there was a climb from 2011 preparing us astrologically for 2020, which was a massive climb. And now we're basically entering the middle ground point to enormous amounts of change in terms of existential change, the change around our conscious makeup, the way we relate to each other as a collective, what it means to be human, of course, battling the human condition and what it means to be human now even more so than ever, because you can imagine how much change is going to be taking place, especially with everything that's happening. With everything that's happening in this more harsher transit of the outer planets. So looking at Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, that takes longer to dance through a star sign, especially Pluto with 20 years ahead of us in Aquarius, and Neptune a huge chunk of time in Aries, and then Uranus going for its 7-point dance moving forward in Gemini. It's harsher because of the way such outer planets interrelate. Looking at Aquarius and Gemini, yes, there is a good, compatibility there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we as a collective will experience that in a way that feels nourishing or wholesome, because it is an air element. It is futuristic. Gemini energy working with Uranus is very futuristic, as is the Aquarian theme. So we will be, bombarded with all sorts of technologies and expectations from technology that will definitely surpass where our own level of human, existence dwells right now. And that's where the big test lives, because, when technology is expecting from the human race, there will be massive changes that aren't going to be easy to experience. And it's one thing if you're getting birthed into that timeline, that generational timeline, and it's another thing if you're going to have to adapt. But we will be seeing all sorts of intensely creative ways of working with our minds and how that links to technology. And that will be a horrific thing for some and a very supportive, helpful tool for others. So it isn't something we can discuss in one audio talk, but looking at the positive and negative energies of these transits simply take us to very futuristic places, regardless of how they're impacting us individually and collectively. And then not to mention, with Neptune and Aries being there, it's an aggressive collective, developmental point where, you take the new law, the new way, the new direction, or you don't. But very, very small openings for negotiation will be there. So a lot will be forced upon humanity. A lot will be forced on the future of the people on this earth. And that's looking at it from just the first imprint of the astrological outer planet messages of where we're heading. Now, let's not forget all these eclipses that are going to happen again as the years take place ahead of us. I have been warning us all for 2025, 2026, just because of the shifting initial energetic imprint of these outer planets. And the warning comes from not just one angle, because, as I mentioned, it being a harsh time for us all, it's very evident because of these outer planets that we're not dealing with, again, wholesome, more sympathetic vibrations. We're dealing with very dictator-like, directional leadership that you either do it or you don't. You can't really negotiate with it. Now, whether that power is in the hands of beneficial allies or, beneficial leaders in the world or community peoples or even friends and dynamics in the immediate environment, then wonderful if it's helpful, But if that power is in the hands of people that obviously don't have our best interest in mind of the highest benefit, it can be quite awful. So we will see the whole play of it, because not all leaders have the best interest. Majority probably don't, especially those that are out there leading in general. But let's not underestimate all the ones who do, because there are many who do. There are many who do have the utmost benefit in mind, and they might not be as visible on the front line, but they're, around. So we need to be looking forward to where that is available to us, okay? Now this eclipse, it will give us belly deep, transformative, strength and urges to push forward and be leaders in our lives where needed. And give us, the tools we need to keep going if we're still here. We obviously still have a lot to give and a lot to learn. So we're in the process of that giving and learning, kind of presentation. So the more we can respect and understand that a lot needs to be given and a lot needs to be learned, and we're here to, leave this earth much better than what it was when we arrived. So having that intention in all we're doing and how we educate our kids, how we educate people around us, how we learn what we choose to focus on, and how we just delegate our everyday time, because, we need to be very careful where we're giving our time and energy to. We don't want this life to be something that has just come and gone and not actually enriched us on the most sincere level in our being. So looking for things that are far more suitable on that much deeper inner true authentic place in us are always going to leave us in better hands and will help us leave this earth in a much better state than what it was when we arrived. So just some general pointers, because I don't want this to be overdone. I think it's good that you just get the key facts because you need them right now. Lilith is about to enter Scorpio, right? We're at the last degrees of Lilith in Libra, and this is what makes 2025 paramount, because it will teach us all so much about the wrath of this Mother Earth, Gaia, our home. She will revolt. She will rise up with all those who are her patrons, who are her protectors, who are her protected divinities, and she will communicate her disgust with where she's been exploited and abused. And that will take lives, unfortunately, and that will harm so much in our, general experience of being on Earth. But that's what happens when we are mining and doing all sorts of abusive cutting of trees and destroying the soil and just exploiting the hand that feeds us without zero respect to the ancient way, and how paramount that is, once again, for, I guess, us as a future peoples now moving forward, needing to uphold the ancient way if we want things to go in the right direction. And there are various modern means to actually uphold the ancient way and how we respect nature and her cycles, but those don't seem to get taught enough. And this is where we failed, because the greed train and the power tripping, self-serving education of the modern world, just believing in the self and the I is a singular and nothing is interlinked, is the biggest misconception and also delusion to our education system, because everything is interconnected, yeah? So this is where, there's been a lot of wrong education, and therefore a lot of us are seeing the massive amounts of damage that shouldn't be this drastic in such a short time. And this comes from believing in the self as a singular and not understanding that everything is interconnected, which is a teaching that Gautama Siddhartha himself taught over 2,500 years ago about the truth, and one of these passages talks about interconnectedness, which is very truth, whether we look at it from philosophical angles or religious angles, it really doesn't matter. Truth is truth. And yes, everything is interlinked, interrelated, interconnected. And that's exactly where this world has to reestablish herself, to not anymore be dragged into self-serving agendas. But that's where the fight gets pretty difficult, because, Lilith in Scorpio returns to her throne. So she reigns. She's going to be leading us from her, full powered positioning. But when Lilith is in full power, what is she doing? She's, I guess, in simple words, showing us the rage, the suppressed rage. And in Scorpio, it won't be happening in a way that has a negotiative capacity. It's at full cataclysmic kind of outward force, where people have to remember who the boss is. And that's the point, no technology, no futuristic means for developing civilization based on world leaders' agendas. Whatever's man-made will always face the bigger threat, and that is nature and the natural law. And this is where the major war and, I guess, issue of 2025 will present itself, because there will be a lot of interplay between the man-made push to certain agendas and then nature's aggressivity and wanting balance to be restored, real balance, so that nature can function how she should function, not how we force her to function, not in ways that oppress her or deplete her. Do you see? 2026 does have the threats of war that have been talked about by me for a while, that are going to another degree of war, which hasn't happened before in our timeline at the very least, which has got a lot to do with, I guess, the fear that's involved in war. And I think 2026, there will be fear amidst the people, because that's how changes can happen. And I think the way certain powers will attack humanity is by making us very, very scared. So we need to be ready for 2026. Now, whether actual war functions, takes place, I pray it doesn't. I pray every day that it doesn't. One thing that's for sure is that we will be made to feel scared in 2026. And there will be agendas behind that. So we just have to be ready to, I think, if we're cultivating our inner dimension and working with our more authentic presence, we won't be as bullied into suffering and being victims in difficult times, because in reality, the real truth, it's within us, and that's where we're trying to return to. We're trying to, accomplish this truth seeker's quest so that we can really benefit ourselves and others. So there's always going to be problems in cyclic existence in this, universe we belong to, because it's cyclic. There's always going to be different ages and stages of development. There's always going to be the ups and the downs. And as much as people really nag and, kind of beg for things to be okay and go well, it's beautiful that aspiration is there. But in times like these, things are actually very volatile, and it's got nothing to do with, the material plane or the reality of the material plane as being a successful dimension. We can use it to help ourselves and others, but what is actually being forced upon us, if we look at the more spiritualistic, divine level, true level of being, is our wish for something true. That's what's really being put on us, for us to want what really matters and to seek it out. And therefore we go through the purificative portals and we accumulate a lot of good deeds through virtuous activity and intentions, and simplify things, declutter, because we basically then become more interested in what really matters. And the more we aim for the true seeker's quest and establish ourselves on such a quest and seek for it and ask for it and believe in greater things like realized beings and enlightened dimensions and divinity, divine beings, merging with things that are divine, the more we believe in that and see it in natural nature as being a force through and through, then we get more and more, I guess, blessed and capable of everything that's ahead and can help many around us through our own leadership qualities and abilities. So looking at the chart itself for this eclipse, just so you can have an idea what's ahead the next couple of weeks in April, from the end of March 2025 to the middle of April 2025, we do have the new moon energy, solar eclipse in Aries at around 10 degrees, Mercury at 0 degrees in Aries, Venus is in the last degrees of Pisces, Mars continues to be in Cancer, Jupiter is in Gemini, Saturn is also in Pisces, relatively close to Venus in Pisces, Uranus continuing on in Taurus, Neptune in Pisces at the last degrees as well, Pluto in Aquarius at 3 degrees, Chiron in Aries in a wide conjunction with this eclipse, and directional node is in Pisces, which means the south node is in Virgo. And, we need to clearly indicate, Lilith, Black Moon Lilith is in the last degrees of Libra going into Scorpio. So the strong aspects around this solar eclipse in Aries is the mercurial energy conjunct Venus, the mercurial energy conjunct Neptune, Venus conjunct Neptune. As you can understand, there's a lot happening that is beneficial because it, will provide a sense of clear investigative abilities. And even though Mars is in squaring position to Chiron, the healing that we need won't happen as easy as we want. However, it will be taking place. You have to understand this. Chiron is there for a reason around this eclipse. So if that is in opposition as well in a wide way to Libra, Black Moon Lilith, what it's doing is it's just pushing us to heal and to be really clear-cut about it. We don't need to wallow anymore. And that's what I'm personally appreciating so much about these eclipses and the Lilithian energies, that there's no more wallowing. Where you see the error and you acknowledge it, you just say, okay, I'm not going down that road again. And you empower yourself because you reclaim parts of you in that process. When Lilith strikes, she is reclaiming lost parts of our being where we have actually become really the victims, where we could have actually just related to situations as leaders and taken a chance to create with that circumstance versus suffer immensely. So there's so much gathering of our being taking place with this eclipse, but I feel it completes so much being in Aries, and then we can arrive back at that ground of just accomplished readiness for what's ahead and strength for what's ahead. Because one beautiful thing about departing from Neptune in Pisces, going towards Neptune in Aries as well, is that, we don't have to create a lie of a reality to function. We can actually relate to reality truthfully for a change, And directional Pisces, directional node, which is where we're headed, right? There is still going to be a lot of depth, a lot of mystery. There still is going to be in the next 18 months a lot of introspective states, and the chance to have a lot of empathy and understand what empathy means because of all the harshness with the outer planets. It's wonderful that Piscean teaching will be there for 18 months. And as the big shift of Neptune happens simultaneously, there will be teachings about compassion and understanding how to be empathic. To understand that will give us what we need, the stamina for the harsher degrees of what's ahead. Because without compassion, without empathy, without a concern for this earth, for ourselves, for living beings, for others, for our intentions, for what motivates us, for people's sensitivity, limitations, for absolutely everything that comes from a more selfless angle, which is the exact opposite of self, right? And how to forgive, because forgiving is a major component to all of what's happening as well. And this eclipse tells us about that with Venus in Pisces and Saturn in Pisces. Neptune in Pisces, directional node in Pisces. So even though the energy is very Aries driven, we're still having a lot of Piscean teaching taking place. And that is about forgiving. Forgiving is needed before Lilith steps into Scorpio, because that is an unforgiving positioning on a worldwide level. So we need to have empathy. We need to forgive. We need to strengthen through forgiveness and not fear the more softer, more tender parts of our being and makeup, because we need to have access to those as things get harsh so that we can stay aligned with parts of us that are not fearing what having the capacity to care for others can do. So, leadership through heart understanding, and the platform of the heart is the training we're getting. But it is a process, there's so much unlearning taking place. As I said, society has been educated in a certain way. We've been totally lied to. The self functioning as an independent is impossible because everything is interlinked. And this is a 2,500-year-old teaching, and you can't even refute it because it's evident, It doesn't matter what angle we look at it, nothing can refute that. Everything is interlinked, interdependent. And that's the reality. So we have been lied to. Our education systems have really, made a mockery of, the modern education has made a mockery of the facts. So we're going through a lot. So empathy will help us as a race. So we'll, the heart being the centerpiece and not losing that part of our being in the process of the harshness, and also how tough we are going to have to be to keep going. And, there's a lot we have to do. We still have to go on with our lives. So many of us have homes, families, responsibilities, and that's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing being very aware of what we have to be responsible for and how much upliftment and peace and happiness that we bring to our responsibilities and what we're committed to, how much more of greatness we bring to the world around us in amidst everything that's taking place, how much more care and concern we bring forth in an authentic way. It's part of the beauty of the changes in us all. And this is where technology won't be able to win, if it does challenge us in the not too distant future. It's where we understand what our superior faculty is, and that is our heart, and that is empathy, and that is sincere care and concern. So it's a big, big journey. We're just on the very start of a whole new era, so to speak. And there will be a lot to share and express. And it won't be easy, but at least we have understood that there are ways to beneficially work with technology, and it's best to always reach into those beneficial abilities of everything we have so that we can keep doing our best. So I wish you all a very important eclipse full of good deeds and good intentions and aspirations, and great things that you're going to give to others and commit to within yourself for others and yourself and for the utmost benefit. And just to be ready for a lot of cleansing in the first 2 weeks of April, and a lot of energy that comes through that helps you lead and be a leader and do what's needed in a responsible way for your life and for the lives of others. And as Lilith does grab the reins in Scorpio, there will be so much magic and potency for those that care about this earth. But at the exact same time, we will witness a lot of unforgiving expressions because Lilith really has had enough of the abuse. So looking forward to her return, but also looking forward to a lot of healing that needs to happen in order for this earth to continue being our home. Thank you so much. May all be auspicious. Bye-bye.